One of the best setup openings to employ in chess as a beginner or an intermediate is known as the King's Indian setup, which actually can be played with both sides, and it's a great tool to kind of get you going, get you developed, and play the middle game from there. So let's jump into it. The King's Indian setup looks like this, and it can be played in a variety of move orders, but I recommend starting with the knight, and then let's just have our opponent develop naturally. Your next move is g3 and bishop g2. I'm going to play normal moves as well. Then you castle, and then you play d3. And d3 is designed as an anti-e pawn move. Okay, so the reason you can play d3 a little bit earlier, like for example, what if I played like this and I took the full center? That's all right. You need to not get attacked. That's why the pawn comes to d3, and then in a slightly different move order, we reach again our little shelter for the bishop, the fianchetto, and the castle with the king. Now, this structure is very, very interesting, and the next few developing moves, especially if you're first starting out, you can finish your development in the following ways. You've got to commit this bishop, so that will either happen on g5 and then make this capture if you're attacked. But let's say, your opponent does this and you can't bring the bishop out this way. Then you can go b3. So something like h6, b3. You develop the bishop out this way. And then you can put this knight like this. And all of this is setting up an eventual pawn push in the center of the board, either to e4 with your e-pawn 2 squares, or either with your c-pawn. You cannot, and I recommend that you do not do both, because what will happen is you will block in your pieces. But I recommend that you choose one of the two, so that you have some sort of command in the center of the board, and then you try to play from there. Now, the King's Indian is very flexible. It's very tough to kind of predict exactly how our opponents are going to set up. But generally, from here on out, we are going to usually start to try to create an attack on the same castled king. Now, what does that look like? So, for example, we'll play something like e4, right? And if our opponent does something like this, just hypothetically speaking, we're going to try to create a kingside attack. And usually that involves either moving the knight to h4 or back to e1. And I know it's like, wait, what? Why would I undevelop my pieces? Well, now you want to start some sort of f-pawn attack. So something like f4 to then mobilize the forces that way. And that also can be played in the same regards with knight h4. So once you get kind of out there playing with your pieces, you're going to start to learn the dynamics between the knights and the bishops and how they work together. Now, you don't necessarily have to play on the king side. You also could employ a strategy, of expanding on the queen side. That's also completely okay and completely reasonable. But this is the King's Indian setup with the white side. All right, that's in 3 minutes. Congratulations, you learned it. Another way, if you don't like your pieces positioned in this way, as I said, you can develop your pieces out like this, make this trade, and the reason why I say this is that this allows you to play your knight out to c3 with pressure on d5, and then after castles, again, trying to put this pawn in the center, and it's okay for you to have your knight attacked. You can swing your knight back, and you're looking for this aggressive f-pawn push. You should remember this, because once we flip the board here in a moment, this is exactly what you're going to get with the black pieces as well. So let's flip the board, all right? Let's flip the board. Here we go. The King's Indian can be played, can be played against anything that white plays. I'm going to start out with e4, because with e4, you actually do have to move the pawn first. If you move the knight right away, you're just going to get attacked. You're in a totally different opening called the Alekhine defense. This is not what you want. So with black, I would say just play d6 first. All right, play d6 first. Now, this is not called the King's Indian defense with black, but it's the King's Indian setup. It's called the Pirc defense. And you should be familiar with white's two most critical attacking methods. There is the Austrian attack, the 3-pawn attack. You will need to know a weapon here of some sort, and basically white just, tries to get aggressive and blow you off the board very quickly. Go look at a couple of videos or top-level games with the Austrian attack. It does not win for white. It's just a little bit scary to play with the black pieces. And the other way that white can play very aggressively is bishop e3, queen d2, and basically, just go after your dark squared bishop. So here, when you see them setting up like this, I would delay castling. And if they're trying to castle queenside, I would maybe try to play a6, b5 or c6, b5 and start to kind of mobilize on that side of the board. The opening is not designed for you to absent-mindedly play your moves and not care about what your opponent is doing. You do need to pay attention to how they're setting up as well. So in King's Pawn, King's Indian positions, or Peer's Defense positions, be mindful of how they're setting up. If they're not setting up in one of these two ways, they're just playing like this, then the setup is the same. Bishop g7. Again, that pawn is protecting the push. So if it pushes, you take it. You always take it. They cannot push that early. You know, I've seen stuff like this. You know, I've seen move 3, take the queen. All right, like this is not good for white. And if they play normally and develop, you're gonna do all the same stuff. Get this bishop out here. The capture for the knight. This knight develops in the center of the board, and you play e5. All right. Now, sometimes they play d4. The setup is all the same. d6, c4. You know, this is, and again, there is opening theory here, but and King's Indian is one of the most deeply theoretically studied openings that exists. But I'm trying to give you the 10-minute rundown, so forgive me if I don't enter 30 moves of deep theory. But for the amateur player, for the 1500 level player, the 1000 rated player, these setups are just good ways to get started. Knight f3, let's say here, and again, the bishop comes out, and in many cases, you know, again, you don't need to take this unless you get attacked. So you can just keep developing. And one way I like to push this pawn into the center of the board is to also slide this knight back to d7. Once the bishop is out, you can slide the knight back. You've got big pressure on the center, and you're looking for e5, f5. You are looking for the e and f pawn attack once the center is closed. You do not try to play f5 just by itself. All right, you need to play e5, close the center, and then get a same side attack going on your opponent. And that's honestly basically it. Because you can play this against anything. c4, King's Indian. Knight f3, King's Indian. You've got the white side. Knight f3, go for a King's Indian. So just again, to review, if you've made it this far, you do need to play this to support the anti-attack on your knight. d3 does have to happen. You can develop this bishop out either this way or this way, and ultimately, soon in the future, you will take control of the center and advance these pawns and try to attack your opponent. And that's basically the entire... well, we're ending with a grob. I was trying to click an empty square, but a little blooper there. That's basically it, my friends. You now know, after just 8 minutes, how the King's Indian setup works, and you could give it a shot with both colors. If you mess it up, that's all right. You need practice more than anything else. For this video, I'm thinking, I've been leaving you prompts in the comments with what to answer. Coffee or tea, and how many cups of it do you drink a day? How about we do that? As always, like the video if you've enjoyed it, share it with somebody who needs an opening or wants a couple of basic opening tips, and subscribe if you haven't. I'll see you in the next video.